you finally started setting boundaries, you went to therapy, you read the books, you understand your patterns now, you're doing the work, and somehow you feel worse than you did before you began. Your body aches in places that have no injury. You cry at random moments, in the grocery store, in your car, over nothing you can name. The anxiety hasn't lessened. If anything, it's louder. You thought healing was supposed to feel like relief, but this feels like coming apart. So you start to wonder, maybe you're doing it wrong. Maybe you're not cut out for this. Maybe you're the exception, the one person therapy can't help. You look around at other people who seem to be healing gracefully. They post about their breakthroughs. They talk about finding peace. And you're here, barely holding it together, wondering why your path looks nothing like theirs. If this is familiar, what I'm about to share might completely reframe what you think is happening to you right now. Because what feels like falling apart may actually be the first sign that your nervous system is finally safe enough to tell the truth. And the reason healing feels worse before it feels better has nothing to do with failure and everything to do with the survival system that's been holding your pain in storage for longer than you realize. According to Dr. Gabor Maté, one of the world's leading voices on trauma and addiction, most of what we call mental health symptoms are not signs of dysfunction. They're signs of adaptation. When you were young, your nervous system had one job: keep you alive. Not happy, not authentic, alive. And if being yourself, being showing anger, expressing need, taking up space, threatened your attachment to the people you depended on, your nervous system made a choice. It buried those parts of you, not consciously, not with words, but through the body. Maté calls this the tension between attachment and authenticity. As children, we need connection to survive. So when authenticity risks that connection, we sacrifice ourselves to stay safe. The problem is, the system that protected you then doesn't realize the danger has passed. So even now, as an adult, when you start to heal, when you begin to set boundaries, feel your anger, speak your truth, your nervous system interprets that as a threat. Because the last time you did those things, you weren't safe. So it fights back, with panic, with exhaustion, with the unmistakable feeling that something is terribly wrong. But here's what most people miss. That sensation isn't proof you're broken. It's proof you're waking up. And what you're about to discover is that there are very specific signs that indicate you're not regressing. You're actually moving through one of the most important phases of recovery, the phase no one warned you about. You're in therapy, you're journaling, you stop people-pleasing at work. On paper, you're making progress. But your body feels like it's staging a rebellion. Headaches that won't quit, digestive issues that seem to come out of nowhere, a fatigue so deep it feels like gravity pulling you underwater, your chest tightens for no reason, you wake up exhausted no matter how much you sleep. You go to the doctor, they run tests, everything comes back normal. But you don't feel normal. You feel like your body is betraying you. This is what Gabor Maté describes as the body keeping the score. For years, your nervous system stayed in survival mode by suppressing what you couldn't afford to feel: rage, grief, terror, loneliness. It stored all of it in your muscles, your gut, your tissues. Healing doesn't make those feelings disappear. It makes them available. When you finally create safety through therapy, boundaries, rest, your body begins to release what it's been holding. And that release doesn't feel like peace, it feels like chaos. Not because something is going wrong, but because your system is finally processing what it couldn't before. Think of it this way. For years, you've been living in a house with a locked basement. You never went down there. You didn't even think about it. The door stayed shut and life went on. Healing is what happens when you finally open that door. And what you find isn't neat. It's decades of unprocessed emotion, memories your body stored because your mind couldn't handle them. You are not getting sicker. You are digesting years of unmetabolized experience. The nausea, the tension, the exhaustion, those aren't signs of failure. They're signs your body finally trusts you enough to tell the truth. There's a version of you that was endlessly understanding. When your parent criticized you, you made excuses. When your partner dismissed your feelings, you wondered if you were too sensitive. When a friend took advantage of your kindness, you told yourself it wasn't that bad, but now suddenly you're angry. And it feels destabilizing, maybe even shameful. You catch yourself replaying old conversations with a new clarity. Things that didn't bother you before now feel intolerable. You want to confront people. You want to scream at them for things that happened years ago. And part of you wonders, is this healthy, or am I just becoming bitter? From a trauma-informed perspective, this anger is not a regression, it's an emergence. Maté's work consistently shows that people who grow up in environments where anger wasn't safe learn to redirect it inward. They become anxious, depressed, self-critical. The anger doesn't go away. It just gets aimed at the only target that won't abandon them, themselves. When you start healing, that anger finally has permission to surface. And it surfaces toward the people and situations that actually harmed you. This is not bitterness, this is clarity. Your nervous system is beginning to distinguish between what was your responsibility and what never should have been. For the first time, you're seeing clearly. The parent who called it discipline when it was control. The partner who called it love when it was manipulation. The friend who called it friendship when it was exploitation. That anger is not a character flaw. It's your self-protection coming back online. It's your system saying, I will not accept this anymore. And if that feels uncomfortable, it's because you were taught that anger makes you unlovable. But anger, when it's truthful, doesn't make you bad, it makes you honest. You used to be able to tolerate it. The friend who only calls when they need something. The family member who talks over you. The partner who never asks how you're doing. But now, you can't. Every interaction feels like sandpaper on skin. You leave conversations feeling drained, resentful, unseen. You start canceling plans, screening calls, avoiding gatherings you used to attend without question. And you wonder, am I becoming difficult, intolerant, less compassionate? Is healing making you a worse person? But here's the deeper truth. When you were conditioned to abandon yourself to keep the peace, you didn't notice the imbalance in your relationships. You were too busy managing everyone else's emotions to register your own. Healing makes you more sensitive, not because you're fragile, but because you're finally present. You're no longer numb. And that means you feel the full weight of dynamics that were always harmful, but never named. According to Maté, many people discover that the relationships they thought were healthy were actually just familiar. And familiarity, especially when rooted in childhood adaptation, can feel like love, even when it's abandonment in disguise. You tolerated the one-sided friendships because as a child, you learned that your role was to give. You stayed in the dismissive relationship because being ignored felt safer than being seen and rejected. You accepted the criticism because it confirmed what you were taught to believe about yourself. None of that was love. It was repetition. When those relationships start to feel wrong, it's not a sign you're regressing. It's a sign your system is remembering what safety actually feels like. And safety, for many people, feels unfamiliar at first, almost dangerous. Because when you spent your life in relationships where you had to perform to be accepted, genuine connection can feel terrifying. You might even find yourself pushing away the people who actually see you. Because being truly seen means they might see the parts you've been hiding. And that feels more vulnerable than anything you've ever done. And here's where it gets even more confusing. You start doing things you've never done before. You take a day off without a reason. You say no without explaining yourself. You let the dishes sit in the sink and go to bed anyway. And instead of relief, you feel guilt, panic, a gnawing sense that something terrible is about to happen. This is what many people don't expect. Healing doesn't just bring up old pain. It brings up old rules. The rules you internalize as a child about what makes you worthy. Work hard, stay busy, don't be a burden, earn your place, prove your value. When you start to rest, to set boundaries, to prioritize yourself, you're breaking those rules. And your nervous system sounds the alarm. Because the last time you broke the rules, there were consequences. Anger, withdrawal, rejection. So even though no one is punishing you now, your body prepares for it anyway. This is what Gabor Maté describes as the internalized parent, the voice that criticizes you even when the original critic is long gone. And when you start healing, that voice gets louder, not because you're failing, but because you're threatening the system that kept you safe. That guilt you feel when you rest, it's not truth, it's conditioning. That panic when you say no, it's not intuition, it's memory. Your body is reacting to a danger that no longer exists. And the only way through is to prove to your system again and again that you can break the old rules and survive, that you can rest and still be worthy, that you can say no and still be loved, that you can take up space and the world won't collapse. It takes time and repetition and a lot of sitting with discomfort. But slowly your nervous system learns the punishment you're bracing for isn't coming. And that realization, quiet and gradual, is what freedom feels like. So why does the body respond this way? Why does getting better feel like falling apart? Gabor Maté often explains it through the lens of the autonomic nervous system, the part of you that operates beneath conscious thought. When you're in survival mode, your system runs on a very narrow bandwidth. It suppresses grief, numbs sensation, keeps you functional. That's not peace, that's shutdown. But it feels stable because nothing is moving. When you begin to heal, when you feel your feelings, set boundaries, stop performing, that system has to recalibrate. And recalibration is not a smooth process. Imagine you've been holding a door shut for 20 years. Your whole body is braced against it, every muscle engaged. You've been in that position so long, you don't even notice the strain anymore. Healing is what happens when you finally let go. The door doesn't open gently, it crashes. And for a moment, everything that was on the other side comes flooding in. This is what therapists call integration. You're not breaking down, you're breaking open. The feelings you're experiencing now aren't new. They've been there all along, waiting for a nervous system strong enough to hold them. And the fact that they're surfacing now, that's not a crisis. It's trust. Your body trusts you enough to stop pretending. It trusts that you're finally stable enough, safe enough, supported enough to feel what you've been carrying. That's why healing often accelerates after you start therapy, or leave a toxic relationship, or establish boundaries. Not because those things made you worse, but because they made you safe enough to feel. But here's what makes this stage so difficult. Healing destabilizes your identity, because the you that survived was built on adaptation, on being useful, acceptable, low maintenance. You knew how to be that person. You knew what they needed, how they moved through the world, what kept them safe. And now you're becoming someone your nervous system doesn't recognize. Someone who rests without guilt, who says no, who takes up space, who feels anger and doesn't apologize for it. Your system scans for danger and finds you. Because the last time you were this authentic, this boundaried, this honest, you weren't safe. So even though you're objectively safer now, your body is wired to expect punishment. That's why healing can feel like waiting for the other shoe to drop, not because you're paranoid, but because your system is caught between two realities. The past that taught you to hide, and the present that's asking you to be seen. And until your nervous system catches up to your new reality, you'll feel that dissonance in your body, the tightness in your chest when you set a boundary, the nausea before you speak your truth, the exhaustion after you prioritize yourself. None of that means you're doing it wrong. It means your body's learning a new language. And like any language, it takes time, practice, and patience. You're teaching your system that authenticity is safe now, that you don't have to perform to be loved, that being yourself won't result in abandonment, And every time you choose yourself anyway, despite the panic, despite the guilt somewhere, you're giving your nervous system new evidence, evidence that you are safe, that the world didn't end, that you are still here, still breathing, still worthy. That evidence accumulates slowly, and one day the panic will be quieter. The guilt will fade faster. The fear will lose its grip, not because the work is done, but because your body finally believes you. And this brings us to the sign most people refuse to see in themselves. The one that sits beneath all the others. The one that, when you finally let yourself feel it, changes everything. There's a specific kind of sadness that comes with waking up. It's not about a single event. It's not about one person. It's the slow creeping realization of how much of your life you spent away from yourself. How many years you performed, how many rooms you shrunk in, how many times you said yes when everything in you was screaming no, how many versions of yourself you killed to stay loved. Maté speaks often about the hidden self, the part of you that went underground to keep you attached, accepted, safe. For many people, healing is the first time they meet that part. And when they do, the grief is staggering. Because you don't just mourn what was done to you, you mourn what you did to yourself in order to survive it. You mourn the child who learned to be quiet, the teenager who made themselves small, the adult who spent decades apologizing for existing. You mourn the friendships you stayed in too long, the boundaries you didn't set, the dreams you abandoned because they felt too selfish. You mourn the years you spent believing you were the problem. And that grief doesn't come all at once. It comes in waves, in moments, when you're driving and a song plays, when you're alone and the silence is too loud, when you finally rest and realize how tired you've been all along. This is not weakness. This is reckoning. And it's one of the most important stages of healing, because it means you finally understand the cost of your own self-abandonment. You're not crying because you're broken. You're crying because you finally see how much you had to break yourself to be loved. And now, for the first time, you're choosing yourself anyway. That grief is holy. It's the evidence that you're no longer willing to betray yourself for acceptance. And even though it hurts, it's also the beginning of something new. Because once you see what you've lost, you can start to reclaim it. The voice you silenced, the boundaries you didn't set, the space you didn't take, they're still there, waiting. And healing is the process of bringing them back. If you're in this place right now, if healing feels harder than you thought it would, I need you to hear this. You are not doing it wrong. You are not the exception. You are not broken beyond repair. What you're experiencing is not a setback. It's a thaw. For so long, your system has been frozen in survival, and now it's melting. That's not comfortable, but it is movement. And movement, even when it's painful, is the opposite of stuck. Gabor Maté reminds us that the question is not what's wrong with you. The question is, what happened to you, and how did you learn to adapt? Every symptom you carry made sense once. The anxiety kept you vigilant in an unpredictable environment. The people-pleasing kept you connected when love felt conditional. The numbness kept you functional when feeling everything would have been unbearable. You are not a collection of failures. You are a breathing testament to resilience. And the fact that you're here now, doing this work, feeling these feelings, questioning these patterns, that is not proof of weakness. It is proof of extraordinary courage. Because healing asks you to do the one thing your nervous system was designed to avoid. Feel everything you had to survive by not feeling. You are doing that in real time, without a manual, without a map, often without support. And it will not always feel this hard. There will come a day when your body stops bracing, when rest doesn't feel like laziness, when boundaries don't feel like betrayal, when being yourself doesn't trigger panic. It won't happen all at once. Healing is not linear. There will be days when you backslide, when the old patterns resurface, when you find yourself apologizing for things that aren't your fault, or saying yes when you mean no, or abandoning yourself to keep the peace. And that's okay, because healing isn't about perfection, it's about direction. It's about noticing the pattern sooner, correcting course faster, forgiving yourself more easily. Slowly, steadily, your nervous system will learn that safety is not something you have to perform for. It's something you can live inside. You'll notice it in small moments. A conversation where you don't apologize for taking up space. A weekend where you rest and don't feel guilty. A relationship where you're seen and you don't have to shrink to stay. A boundary you set without shaking. A feeling you let yourself have without judgment. A moment of anger that doesn't send you spiraling into shame. That's what healing actually looks like. Not the absence of hard feelings, but the capacity to be with them and with yourself without abandoning either. Maté often says, the wound is not your fault, but the healing is your responsibility. And you're doing it, even when it feels like too much, even when your body is screaming, even when you wonder if it's worth it. You are proving every single day that you are worth the effort it takes to come home to yourself. So if today is hard, let it be hard. Your system is not punishing you. It's finally trusting you enough to tell the truth. And that truth, no matter how painful, is the beginning of freedom. Because once you know what you're carrying, you can start to put it down. Once you understand why you adapted, you can start to choose differently. Once you see the cost of your self-abandonment, you can start to reclaim yourself. It won't be fast, it won't be easy, but it will be worth it. Which of these signs felt most familiar to you? Was it the physical symptoms, the anger, the shifting relationships, the grief, or something I didn't name? I'd love to hear your experience in the comments. And if conversations like this feel valuable to you, if they help you make sense of what you're carrying, consider subscribing. There's more where this came from. Healing is not about becoming someone new. It's about unbecoming everything you had to be to survive, so the person you always were can finally breathe. You're not falling apart. You're finally falling together. And that makes all the difference.